Eskom has synchronized Unit 5 of the Kusile Power Station to the national grid for the first time. The unit will contribute an extra 800 megawatts to the country's power system. Meanwhile, the power utility has announced the return of load shedding following a brief reprieve during the festive season. We speak to Head of Energy Secretariat at Sanedi Professor Sampson Mamphweli. Prof, thank you very much for your time this morning. Do you remember what reasons were given in terms of the reprieve, why we enjoyed that short reprieve?
Good morning to you and the viewers. So the reprieve was basically because the demand was low and the breakdowns were also slightly lower compared to what was happening the previous few months. So in terms of the breakdowns, Eskom was sitting at about 14,000 megawatts. And you will recall that initially, before the appointment of the Minister of Electricity, we were sitting at about 18,000 megawatts at some point. So there was some kind of improvements here and there, as well as the fact that many factories had closed for the December festive seasons. So the demand was quite low. Eskom also ramped up maintenance during that particular period. And they also had enough generation reserves in terms of pump storage and the diesel and things like that. So that was that in its totality led to the reprieve that we saw during the festive season. Now they've announced stage 2 load shedding, which is because of various other factors as well.
What drives demand? So when we say that demand was low, we heard you speak about factories closing, and so that helped. Is that the only factor that drives demand, factories? Is it industry?
So the factories, take most of the demand, and then the households, yes, we've got demand at households level, but then they're not comparable to the demand at factory level, because those are the large consumers of electricity. So when they close down, it takes away a huge chunk of the demand. Some of them don't close down completely. They basically go on what we call mothballing of their systems, basically running them at very low load, so that when they come back in January, they just ramp up in terms of their production and other activities. So the factories are the ones that drives the demand in the main. At household level, you've got things such as your geysers that drive demand very high, and as well as your cooking stoves. Those are some of the things that drive demand very high. So that's basically what happens during the festive season.
Cooking stoves. Okay. Professor Mamphweli, factories are still closed. You'll notice on the channel that we are not running business stories because industries are still closed. And so given that industry is the biggest contributor to load shedding, but they are closed, how then do we understand why we have been plunged into darkness?
So what's happening now is, I've looked at the Eskom numbers. The breakdowns have gone up. We're now sitting at about 16,000, approaching 17,000 megawatts. And that's basically because we're dealing with a system that has not been properly maintained in the past. So breakdowns happen at any point in time at any of the old power stations. So that's one of the reasons. The second reason is that Eskom has ramped up maintenance. So they've taken down up to above 8,000 megawatts for maintenance. And that is in line with the President's Energy Action Plan, because the action plan says, irrespective of what happens, you need to keep maintaining the system so that we have what we call long-term gains. So that is another issue. So once about 4,000 megawatts of the 8,000 megawatts comes back in the next week or so, if they're able to do so, then there will be a bit of a reprieve in terms of load shedding. The demand is still very low. I saw it was hovering at about 24,000 megawatts. We shouldn't be having load shedding if we don't have higher breakdowns, and as well as the ramping up of the the maintenance of the planned maintenance part of things. So those two things are the main causes of load shedding, and obviously Eskom is preparing for the worst case scenario when the factories open, so that we don't go into extensive stages of load shedding. They need to bring back to service the part of the 8,000 megawatts that is out for maintenance, to ensure that and also deal with the breakdowns at the same time. And also they need to have what we call the generation reserves in terms of the pump storage and the diesel, so that when industries start to ramp up in terms of production, we don't find ourselves moving into stages such as your stage 6 and stage 8 load shedding. That's basically the planning that's taking place at the moment.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Mamphweli, what is the understanding of the long-term plan, more so when you speak of the just energy transition, right? So when we look at the breakdowns and the planned maintenance, because South Africans, you speak to them, they'll tell you that they're playing their part. They switch off the geyser. You can't not cook. So they have to use the stoves. But when it comes to breakdowns and planned maintenance, what is your understanding of the long-term goal in relation to the just energy transition?
So on the long-term side of things, we have what we call long-term power system planning, which is done through the integrated resource plan. I know that the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy has been busy revising the integrated resource plan. It has now been approved by Cabinet. As soon as government opens, we will have that published for public comments. The revision was basically because of several things. One of them is the fact that the prices of technologies have gone down. So we need to take advantage of that when we look at our energy mix going forward. The other aspect has been the fact that we are in an energy crisis. We need to appreciate that fact. And then we need to plan in line with the President's Energy Action Plan. The President's Energy Action Plan has got a number of pillars. One of them is to fix the existing coal fleet. That is the reason why we are facing blackouts. And that's why, even under very difficult circumstances, Eskom still needs to embark on that maintenance program, because it's part of the President's Energy Action Plan. And that is part of the short to medium term kind of a plan. We still have things such as your small scale embedded generation, where government has made available money through the rebate program. Many people have not yet taken advantage of the 15% or 25,000 rand that government is giving when you put up your rooftop solar PV. You can do that through the website of the National Treasury. We have seen an uptake at the beginning when government made that announcement, and it moved of 4,000 megawatts of small-scale embedded generation on people's roofs. So those are some of the things that government is doing on the long-term basis. On the short-term basis, we've got your demand response, which is part of the President's Energy Action Plan that NICOM has been working on, which I believe will be kicking in as soon as government opens in a month or two. The demand response, we know the numbers are saying that once that program kicks in, we can save up to 3,000 megawatts through load shifting, as well as energy efficiency. And if you look at that, if you save up to 3,000 megawatts, that's three stages of load shedding that you end up saving. So those are some of the things that government will have to start implementing as soon as we open, so that there can be a bit of a reprieve on the side of the consumers.
Prof, I do sincerely beg your pardon. It's Mamphweli. And so, Prof. Mamphweli, when you speak of demand response or load shifting, what does that mean?
So what that means is that we look at the time when the system is constrained. Normally, it's in the morning when the demand is high, and late evening. We've got the morning peak and then the evening peak. During those times, we then implement measures to take away some of the load. For instance, when we look at the geyser control systems, we have systems that we can install in people's homes, and when we can look at the period when we have enough electricity, and then we can remotely control the geysers, switch them on and off. Basically, we switch them on when the demand is low, and then we switch them off when the demand is high. That is what we call load shifting, because you are basically shifting the load from the time when the demand is high to the time when the demand is low, so that you are able to control your power system. That takes away quite a lot of megawatts from the system, and then it can provide reprieve. When we talk of energy efficiency, we look at implementing technologies that use less electricity as opposed to the technologies that use a lot of electricity. A simple example is your lights at home. Yeah, these days we've got what we call the LED lights that use very much less electricity. You have them at 3 watts and 5 watts. And if you replace the 100 watts with the 3 watts and the 5 watts, you get savings yourself at home, and also you assist at national level in terms of lowering the demand. Those are some of the things that we're looking into when we talk about energy efficiency and demand response, which includes load shifting as well.
Mm. This load shifting, Prof, how will it be managed? You could forgive some South Africans who may be skeptical that it would appear that Eskom can barely manage itself, and so how will you manage a person's geyser? How will that work, right? Will South Africans sign up for it? Will you have a choice to opt in or opt out of this particular scheme?
Yes, so you have a choice to opt in and to opt out. The systems that are used are remotely controlled, so they come and install a device in that controls the switching on and off of your geyser, and then they can control it remotely in a central kind of a location. Eskom has got very advanced systems. I must say, we have the most advanced power system in the African continent as things stand, irrespective of the fact that we're struggling in terms of our generation capacity and meeting our demand. So in terms of the control systems, that's why they're also able to implement load shedding the way they're able to do it. We've got they've got the various software systems that they use to control things remotely. So you can opt in and you can opt out, but I would encourage people to opt in, because myself, I also have a device that I'm using in one of my properties, and I'm saving quite a lot. It's those kind of devices that you can control using your phone. You can set it such that it automatically on its own, without you interfering, put on your geyser for 2 to 3 hours, or then whatever number of hours that you set, and it can put it off. And you can set it such that it puts on your geyser during the time when the demand is low, because you also realize savings on that. When we use electricity at the time when the demand is high, you pay more. That's one of the things that many people may have not realized. But when you use electricity when the demand is low, you pay less. So there are quite a lot of advantages. So I would encourage people to say, when government starts with that program of controlling your geysers remotely and things like that, opt in so that you save on the money as well, and as well as assisting the nation in terms of dealing with the security of supply of electricity.
Okay. Prof, just a final question to you, because you spoke of the energy mix in terms of the pillars of the just energy transition. You spoke of the energy mix. You spoke of the existing coal fleet needing to be fixed. We've got problems, or there's not that much uptake with the rebates program, rather. And so when we take a look at the energy mix in the country, you've got countries like the United Kingdom right now who have sort of muted their voices when it comes to transitioning, right, to so-called renewables. And so how should we understand that? Because the debate there is that why should we be rushed into this, because it's going to be quite costly. It is not up for debate that there's climate change. It is not up for debate that there needs to be a lessening of the footprint. What is of concern is the rush to do it. Now, a country that is said to be a developing nation is now striving to get developed nation outputs, or we are placing ourselves with so-called developed nations in terms of our outputs on this. What is the rush?
So it boils down to long-term power planning, power system planning, which we do through the integrated resource plan. As things stand, so what we were supposed to have done when we had the integrated resource plan 2010, we were supposed to have religiously implemented the provisions of that particular plan, but we kind of slowed down for other reasons, and we're running short of about 10,000 megawatts. If you go back to Integrated Resource Plan 2010, and then you come back to Integrated Resource Plan 2019. So most of the power, the coal fleet, the assumption in the Integrated Resource Plan, which comes from Eskom, by the way, is that we've got the old fleet, some of which needs to be replaced because it's reaching its end of life. So the plan from the South African point of view has been that when this coal fleet reaches its end of life, we don't build new coal power stations, we replace it with renewable energy so that it assists us in terms of decarbonization of the sector as well. So what happened was that we were slow in terms of bringing in new generation capacity, which is partly the reason why the President's Energy Action Plan talks about acceleration of the procurement of new generation capacity, which the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy has been doing quite religiously. The challenge then has been that we also have the grid constraints that are stopping the Minister from procuring renewable energy from areas such as the Eastern Cape, where we've got the resource, but the grid is constrained. The Northern Cape, we've got the resource, the grid is constrained. That is why the Minister of Electricity is now hard at work, working on the grid transmission plan, which he has presented to Cabinet, and Cabinet said he must then refine it and bring it back to Cabinet for final approval. So those are some of the things. In terms of the Just Energy Transition, we've got the Just Energy Transition Partnership that was developed at the Presidency. It is now a government kind of a plan going forward in terms of what needs to be done at these power stations when we close them down, so that the economy can continue to operate, so that the people who are employed in these particular power stations are not necessarily out of jobs. And it talks about things such as your repurposing of the power stations, your refiring of the power stations, as well as the reskilling and retraining of the people who are working in these particular power stations. And when we talk about the repurposing and the refiring, we don't necessarily exclude any technology. So it still includes your gas, it still includes your coal with emission abatement technologies coming on board as well. So it's an all-encompassing kind of a plan. We are learning from countries such as China. We are saying, instead of shutting down these coal power stations rapidly without having enough generation capacity, let's extend the life of these power stations, fix them, and then shut down as we gradually bring in new generation capacity. And I expect that the new integrated resource plan will call for the extension of life of the coal fleet that can still give us longevity.
Okay. Professor Sampson Mamphweli, Head of Energy Secretariat at Sanedi. Thank you very much, Prof, for your time this morning.